Hello there, and welcome to the third series review. This is of Kenny versus Spenny. Let's just get straight into it. There's no need to do a big introduction. If you've seen the other two videos, you know how this goes. I'm just going to go through every single episode individually, say what I personally think of them, and let's see if Series 3 is better than Series 2. So the first one is First One to Laugh Loses. This episode is one of those episodes which I kind of slept on a bit. The reason why is because I don't know, I just never really remembered this episode as much. But upon reflection, this is a really good episode. Like, this is really great. It's a funny episode as well. You have Kenny, who clearly laughs at basically everything. You know, he's a bit like me, you know, laughing at everything. No matter how horrible or tragic it may be, you're still going to laugh. And, you know, Spenny, he's a straight man. He, you know, he takes everything seriously to the point of, like, severe autism, I guess you could say. Spenny is, you know, he's such a straight man that he's trying to indoctrinate himself by watching Holocaust movies or looking at, you know, violent images such as SEALs being beaten to death or 9/11, the Holocaust again, Hitler and Mussolini, you know, stuff like that. And Kenny is trying his best to try and make Spenny laugh, but the problem is Spenny never really laughs at anything that Kenny does in general, and because Kenny is struggling a lot in this competition. This is one of the few competitions where Kenny is definitely on the back foot here. And so Spenny is, you know, stone cold. Of course, Kenny, on the other hand, he comes very close to laughing, and there's one scene in particular which is just hilarious. It's where Spenny walks in, you know, as this, like, little girl almost, just degrading himself, and, you know, poor Kenny, like, he's trying to keep that laughing, and he managed to do so, but he had to leave the room. Luckily, he used the tactic of, like, deflecting and saying, you know, look at you, you're degrading yourself, you're making yourself into an idiot, and this ain't funny and all that, you're trying to, you know, humiliate Spenny, because Spenny breaks character. Similarly, he brings a midget along and dresses the midget as a baby, and again, Kenny comes very close to laughing, but doesn't do so. It's great back and forth. And, you know, this particular episode shows sort of the tactics used between both men, and it shows sort of this war of attrition almost. You know, they're both deciding their battle plans. They're both going for the attack, both are going on the defense, you know, and it then all culminates into the big finale, which is where Spenny brings in a friend of theirs, and, you know, the friend just does all this weird shit. He's hilarious to look at. He's hilarious, you know, in his mannerisms, and, you know, both of them are struggling, and eventually they both laugh. However, Kenny ultimately laughs first, and, you know, unfortunately, this is one of the competitions that I don't think Kenny would have won anyway. This is, you know, it was already a given chance that Spenny would have won. And it's one of the few episodes where Spenny wins, and it's actually very entertaining. This is just a really good episode. Great way to start this series off. It isn't as strong as Beer. You know, Beer is a massively, you know, superior episode, but this is better than the first season's opener, which was Lose More Weight. Still, I think this is a fantastic episode. The humiliation is brutal. Like, Kenny has to eat one of Spenny's bogies, and it's disgusting. I don't even want to think about it. But yeah, overall, fantastic start to the series. Unfortunately, what comes next is a massive step down in quality. And that massive step down in quality is Who Do Gay Guys Like More? One of the single worst episodes of Kenny vs. Spenny, and I'm just surprised they went with this for their second episode, you know. I feel like the excuse is they wanted to change the dynamic a bit. You know, have a Spenny win episode first thing, which is rare. Then have, you know, where both of them lose, and then have Kenny basically dominate Spenny for the rest of the competition. Why they have this as the second episode, I do not know, because logically speaking, this is a really bad episode to have as your second episode, especially because of how, you know, cruel of an episode it is. This isn't even very funny. It's not funny at all. This is like, you know, a lot of people have gone on the defense against Spenny, or for Spenny, I should say, against Kenny, in the sense that Kenny is too cruel towards Spenny, but not really. Spenny kind of deserves it most of the time, and plus, you know, Spenny's reactions are hilarious. This, on the other hand, is just cruel. This is just unnecessarily nasty, and you feel uncomfortable watching it. This is one of the few episodes which I refuse to rewatch again, and I don't know how to really describe it. I watched it once, you know, I'll be honest. I didn't rewatch this one because I just felt uneasy watching this one. It just felt horrible. And it is just a horrible episode. So basically, both Spenny and Kenny, they go on a date with a gay guy, and they gotta see who's gonna win more. I mean, already it's a who do X like more episode, which already aren't very good episodes in general. There's very few that are good, like who does she like more, which is definitely a hilarious episode. But this one is just cruel. So Spenny and the gay guy get on really well, and Spenny even makes out with the gay guy. However, when Kenny comes along, Kenny claims that Spenny is actually in the closet and is actually gay with Kenny, and he doesn't actually love the gay guy and all that, and he really hurts this poor man's feelings, and of course he goes too far to the point that the gay guy just leaves the show, and the competition basically ends straight away. And because neither of them won and they both lost, they are forced to be teabagged on the forehead as a humiliation imposed by the film crew, which is, admittedly the humiliation is pretty funny. But yeah, this is just a cruel episode, and to have it as your second episode in your new series, it's not a good thing. Like, if you're going to order a bunch of episodes and you want these episodes to be depicted in such a way that you have for example, you have in the first series you had Lose More Weight, and then you had Stay Awake, which was a neck and neck competition, then you had Chef, which you have Spenny cheating. I mean, I'm not really a fan of Chef, but you get the picture. And then the fourth one, again, who can stand up the longest, again, another very close competition where, again, Kenny sort of cheats, but there is a lot going on in it. Series 2 had, Beer and Naked as your first two episodes. They were like massively, dramatic compared to the first series, which made it, infinitely better. Whereas series 3, starts off, I'm not going to lie, starts off quite slowly. You got First One to Laugh Loses, which is a funny episode, don't get me wrong, a great episode. But then you have this one, and it's like a massive nosedive. And like, I do wonder if this would have affected ratings, because people would have seen this and tuned off for the rest of the series, which I wouldn't blame them. Like, this bad episode being a second episode is a killer for many shows. You need to have good episodes for your first bit, or at least decent episodes, so that people will tune in for the following week. And then if you have some bad lower rating episodes, you can have them on later. Series 2 kind of did this. It had like the bad episodes more or less shoehorned in towards the end, although series 2 had a lot more bad episodes throughout the series as opposed to good ones. Yeah, this is just like, my only reasoning is that they wanted to change that dynamic so that the first episode will have Spenny win, second episode will have a draw, then third, fourth, fifth episode will be a mixture of Kenny and Spenny. That's my only assumption, but they could have maybe moved this one a little bit later on in the series so it wouldn't taint the rest of the show. Yeah, this is just a really dreadful episode, a cruel episode. I fucking hate it. Which, it's in my top 5 worst episodes for a reason. This is just a very nasty episode. However, the next episode is perhaps the most famous Kenny vs. Spenny episode of all time. It's probably the most beloved episode. Who Can Wear a Dead Octopus on the Head? It is my number 1 favorite episode. It is the number 1 favorite episode to a lot of people for very good fucking reason. The concept itself is really bizarre. I mean, all they have to do is wear a dead, cold octopus on their head for however long, and then they take it off. However, what takes place is what makes it fantastic. You have Kenny spiking Spenny's Spenny's like powder for his drink with LSD. And Spenny is off the fucking rocker the whole episode. It's funny because Kenny technically loses the competition straight away. He takes off the octopus. He stresses like how much he can't wear this thing on his head, so he cuts off the tentacles, sews them onto the hat so it looks like he's got it on. He then gives the LSD to Spenny, so Spenny wouldn't have had a clue even if he wasn't wearing the octopus on his head. But the funny thing is he kept the octopus on. That's the thing that makes me laugh the most, is that Spenny keeps the octopus on the whole time as he's like going on this like philosophical like monologue at one point about how beautiful life is. Like he cries over a bug that gets squashed that he picks up, and it gets worse. You see the degradation of Spenny throughout this episode. It's fantastic. You see him like go from he's a bit high, he's a bit off his rocker, but then you see him like in the bathroom chasing after Kenny in like a bunny costume before he goes rah and scares the shit out of him, and he breaks like one of the like cabinets, one of those weird like fabric cabinets. To be fair, well, it isn't like broken, and he I love the quote where he screams, "I was born, man." I love this episode, and it just gets worse. Like he then like dances in the rain and shits himself, and there's this one fantastic shot of Spenny. There's this one fantastic shot of Spenny, and he's like looks so pathetic. He looks like he's crying, and he turns his head. He looks like the octopus is like draped down across his face almost, but you can see like his nose, his mouth, and he just looks, and like you can hear Kenny like saying, "We gotta get him in. We gotta get him in." Like, I do love the fact that Kenny does genuinely show concern in this episode as well. Like, usually he doesn't show concern at all to Spenny's well-being, but here, like, after seeing how far he goes, he shows concern. And, like, Spenny just looks so pathetic. It's brilliant. And you got, like, Donnie then cleaning him up afterwards. He's sat in the shower, and it's like... Oh, like, poor Kenny, like, he just wants Spenny to just take off the octopus and end this, like, horror show. Like, it makes you wonder what happened afterwards. Like, what happened, like, after the octopus was thrown into the river, which... I love that Spenny does that. I love that he takes it off and throws it into the river. Like, and it's this dramatic sort of, like, action. After he just walked out into the streets in his, like... Oh, what was it? He was like, in his underwear with, like, slippers on. Yeah, like, it's just hilarious, this episode. You have Kenny's shirt as well, which is that really infamous picture from Japan, which has that octopus basically giving cunnilingus to a woman. And I love the fact that he wears that shirt. Like, there's all these other little details. The cat on the string now in a deleted scene. The humiliation was that he inserted his tongue into the asked the cat. Obviously it's removed because it's technically bestiality, but and what else is there that's really great? There's all these little things, the argument at the end, you only hear it at the end where Spenny is freaking the fuck out, and like Kenny says, I'll only give you a tiny bit, and of course he then says, this is getting you back for what you did this one time. And of course Spenny says, it wasn't me, it was this other guy. And then of course if you listen to commentary of this particular episode, like Spenny is so fucking angry, and like Kenny still says, you did this. And of course when Spenny says, it wasn't me, it was this guy, and of course they go back and forth. Kenny says that's bullshit. I don't know what the true story is about that, but I just love there's a backstory for about this. This episode is brilliant, like from beginning to end. You have this obscure idea of a competition, then you have like the drugging, and then you have a hilarity. And as I said, I love the fact that Spenny, despite everything, is still keeping the octopus on his head. Like, he doesn't like stop it. And I'm curious on like what happened afterwards. I really am. I'm curious like how Spenny like was after they took off the octopus, like how they would have treated him, how they would have like what happened. Because, like, there must have been a whole lot. Like, it would have lasted a little bit longer than that. I wonder if he was really ill afterwards, The alternate humiliation is that Spenny eats sushi off of Kenny's naked buttocks, which isn't as extreme as the other one. But, I mean, it doesn't really matter. This is a fantastic episode. Like, there's a reason why this is considered the greatest episode of all time. It is brilliant. Like, this is brilliant. Like, honestly, they should have had this one as the first episode of Series 3 rather than the third. Because chronologically speaking, this is the third, not the first. I know some people think that it is the first, and I think Kenny on his YouTube channel has rated this one as the first one, which makes sense because this one is a massive hit. And having this and then having Laugh afterwards would have been also great. But yeah, like, what else is there to say? The octopus episode is the greatest episode in the show. It is the best episode in the show. It is the one that everyone loves, the one most memorable episode of the show. Even to this day, it gets referenced. It is fantastic. Fan-fucking-tastic. Who can run a 10-mile race? I love the little joke that Kenny makes at the beginning where he says, he wanted 10 miles to race, and straight away we have a little insight to Kenny's plan. And, even though, Kenny says in the commentary for this episode that, there were people who were tricked by this, I was never tricked by this. I kind of knew from the get-go it wouldn't have been like this. But the fact that people did get tricked is pretty surprising, honestly, and it kind of adds to the episode, actually. So Kenny, from the get-go, he goes on the phone call, he's acting very strange, he's acting a lot more stressed, he's acting a lot more dramatic than usual. You see his mum, and she's not looking very well, and then, of course, he comes up with that his mum has died. The episode is quite slow and all that. Obviously, because it's a TV show, they still have dramatic music, which kind of takes away from the fact that, we're trying to trick people into thinking that Kenny's mum has actually died. Spenny feels really bad. He goes to the funeral. And then we get a cutaway to Kenny getting ready for the 10-mile race. And he is, he's got this big fat grin on his face. And, what an evil prank. What an evil prank. And I love it. This is definitely, as Kenny said in his commentary episode of this particular episode, this is definitely an underrated episode. Like, a lot of people would sleep on this one. Some people, don't really find the joke that funny. Some people, don't really find the competition idea that very funny or interesting, And Kenny himself has gone on record. He doesn't like the sporty ones, which is why he did this very elaborate prank on Spenny. So elaborate, in fact, that it surprisingly worked in the end. And honestly, that makes it even better. Spenny, upon realizing that he has been tricked, he is fucking angry. Like, he is beyond fucking angry. And you just, you see Spenny get angry a lot in these shows, but this is one of the few times where Spenny gets really angry to the point that, he doesn't even, acknowledge Kenny when they're both racing with each other. Kenny, being very unfit, he fails the race. Ironically, despite this big elaborate plan, he still loses the competition because Spenny is much more fit. Despite the fact that he also had a 15-minute head start as well, if I recall. He slows down, he can't run anymore, and Spenny wins. This is a good episode. This is a really good episode. I think the elaborate prank is obviously the big... I just said prank is the best part about this particular episode. This is obviously, an episode which, to be fair, if it didn't have the prank side of things, it would have been a very boring episode, because let's be honest now, who really cares about the sporty episodes? The reason why some of the sporty episodes really work, like a basketball coach, is because of the shenanigans that happens in the episode, not the actual competition itself. And this is another example of it. The shenanigans in this episode makes it better. Now, obviously, a lot of people were tricked by this. I wasn't. It's kind of obvious it's not, true, but Spenny being tricked, and of course, I guess, you have to be there. It's one of those things where you have to kind of be in Spenny's shoes to understand how effective this prank was. And it worked. It worked like a charm, until it didn't, obviously. But that's beyond the point. This is a very good episode. A very, very good episode. It's funny because Series 3 so far has had 3 really good episodes and 1 really bad episode. And considering we're in the first 5 episodes, we're about to have another really bad episode. And that is Who Can Make a Better Porno? And this is a bad episode. It's a surprisingly boring episode. That's what it is. It's a very boring episode, all things considered. You think, oh, well, porno, it's going to be kind of sexy and all that. It's not. It's boring as hell. Spenny is very invested into it, and the fact that Spenny has, on many occasions, even afterwards, gone into very gracious details into his fetishes and things. For example, he loves mother and son incest, and he also enjoys teacher and student sex. Yes, it could be in Spenny's case. But yeah, Spenny is very invested in this. He thinks this is the greatest thing in the world. And he I do like the idea that he creates a very generic one, whereas Kenny is just not taking it seriously, and he creates some weird mashup of bullshit. However, there is a alternate version of this episode, which probably would have been a million times better had it not unfortunately been unveiled. So the alternate episode of this is that Kenny actually recorded Spenny having sex, and he was going to submit that as the final porno tape to the producers. The idea was that what happened was, according to Kenny, is that the chick that he's filming with during this particular episode, he apparently had sex with her, and Kenny sneakily recorded it and was going to use that. Unfortunately, Spenny found out, and as a result, he freaked the fuck out and ordered it to be destroyed. So what would have happened was he would have gone over and he would have submitted that, and that would have been his tape. And even if Kenny would have lost, the reaction would have been fucking hilarious. Like, imagine Spenny seeing that. He would have been angry. It would have been fantastic. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. Instead, we got a very boring episode. Kenny and Spenny are apart throughout the whole episode until the very end, and as a result, you don't really get great interactions with each other. You don't have them sabotaging and pranking each other. Spenny is honestly very dull. I mean, as the guy at the end says, Spenny created a very formulaic and average porno, whereas Kenny just had fun and decided to do like the most goofy shit possible. And to be fair, I would have awarded Kenny that as well, because at least it's original. We do get one of the most infamous humiliations, in which Spenny performs anal sex onto a Kenny inflatable male doll, which yeah, it's like with the puppet, giving that a blowjob. It honestly, the reason why I don't like this episode, the reason why it was in my worst episodes list, is because it's just a very boring episode. Like, there is nothing to talk about. Like, you think an episode idea like this, it might have been kind of interesting, but no, it doesn't really go anywhere. It's a very boring episode, and considering what it could have been, yeah, I feel like it could have been a whole lot better. Right then, we've had the greatest episode of Kenny vs. Spenny in the Octopus episode. Now time for the single worst episode of Kenny vs. Spenny. The one which I consider the number one most terrible, most boring, most unfunny, most staged episode in Kenny vs. Spenny. Who can lift more weights with their genitalia? I actually tried to rewatch this to try and think, okay, maybe it'll be like Who Can, in the sense that my opinion of it has sort of changed. Who Can isn't as bad in my opinion anymore, but rewatching this one, it just felt worse. This is the most fake episode in the whole show. Maybe, just maybe, Kenny and Spenny did indeed, have a falling out. Maybe Spenny did quit the show, but the way it's staged, the way it's set up is like, it's the type of thing you'd see in a lot of other shows, like cartoons, for example, where, the characters have a bit of a breakup and the other guy tries to find a replacement. And what you get is just a terrible fucking show. And it's just boring. This is a painfully boring episode. There's not a single gag that works. The idea of the competition probably could have been funny. It could have been interesting. But no, Spenny throws a hissy fit and he's out the competition. Which then begs the question, why do they even bother filming? Like, why did they even bother creating an episode if, one of the main cast members decided to quit? Why didn't they just, I don't know, do a different competition? Do a different idea? They could have, I mean, as generic it might sound, they could have just done a clip show instead. But no, they had to do this episode, and it's a waste of an episode. It's a filler episode. It is shit. It is absolute fucking shit. I fucking hate this episode. I really do. There is nothing good about this episode. Nothing at all. Like, if there's any episode of Kenny vs. Spenny which you should 100% skip, it's this one. You will not miss a single thing, and for good reason. It is crap. It is dreadful. I fucking hate this episode. It is the single worst episode. Honestly, like, I feel like Kenny, Spenny, all the producers, all the camera crew, every single one of them should be fucking ashamed to have even produced this fucking thing. Like, I mean, I love your show, but this is something where I you should be flogged for. That's how I feel. Okay, that's a bit dramatic, but like, yeah, this is just a abysmal. It's a time waster. It is single-handedly the worst episode of the show. And it's shocking that we have the best episode and the worst episode in the same season, but hey-ho. Hopefully things will get better, because we've currently had 3 good episodes and 3 bad episodes, and oh boy, all 3 of the bad episodes are on my worst list. As the other good episodes, well, only one of them is on my best list, so yeah. Hopefully things will improve. Who is cooler? Now, this is a good example of what could have happened if the competition with Who Do Children Like More, Who Do She Like More actually was more legitimate without Kenny cheating in prior. Because I think this really shows what Spenny is more like. Spenny is not cool. I mean, from the get-go, he loses the competition. And you want to know why? Because the way he's dressed, he looks like a fucking retard. Like, he really does. Like, Spenny would have lost from the get-go. And the funny thing is, he does lose. Like all it takes is him walking down the stairs for them to just to laugh at him. Because he genuinely does not look cool whatsoever. Spenny is like an alien. He's trying to be a human being. And, honestly, Spenny is kind of cringe in this episode. But at the same time, it does deliver some great moments. Similarly, Kenny decides to fake a drug overdose. And the funny thing is, Kenny does it in such an over-the-top way that Spenny surely would have noticed, this is clearly fake. But no, Spenny actually believes it. He actually, freaks the fuck out and he tries to help him. And, I also quite like the fact that Kenny apparently behind the scenes was doing all this, for weeks on end. In the sense that, what was I saying? In the sense that Spenny, noticed all these things. And given the fact that, Kenny and Spenny, for that matter, have both said in the past, that they both were on drugs during the show and were both on drugs before the show, it makes sense. It actually makes a lot of sense in context. And I loved, but at the same time, I just love the fact that Kenny goes for the most over-the-top options. And yet, Spenny believes it. Spenny fucking believes it. He doesn't picture the fact that Kenny is literally just like a living cartoon. And so when it comes to Judgment Day, what I love about this judgment is that he even says, Kenny and Spenny both fucking lost, technically speaking. But because Spenny walks down the stairs looking like that, he loses almost immediately. He loses straight away. And to make matters worse, Spenny's overreaction, his inability to take a joke, his inability to just laugh it off, just makes him even more of a fucking loser. And it's amazing just to see just how pathetic Spenny really is in context to everything around him. It's just a lot of people always point out, as I've mentioned, who does she like more, for example? Spenny, obviously would have lost that from the get-go. His reaction, his behaviour, it's weird, it's unusual. He would have made her uncomfortable. Kenny didn't need a cheat. Same thing could be said about Who Do Children Like More. Spenny's actions and behaviour, immediately, it just, it puts Kenny, it puts Kenny at an advantage, even if he did cheat. Spenny is, I've said it already, he's like an alien. He doesn't understand how humans work, and he doesn't understand human reaction and all that. And what you get is, him acting more weird and unusual, and as a result being a complete fucking freak. And that's what makes it so great. This is a great episode. I really like this episode. I think this is a fantastic episode. It's hilarious. The results at the end are hilarious. Massive step up from the previous episodes. Massive step up. So I guess that's probably why I'm a lot more positive towards this one than what came before it. But hey-ho. On to the next one. Who can produce more semen? This is another one of those sleeper episodes in the sense that I kind of neglected this one a bit because I must admit I didn't really like the stagedness of this. But upon rewatching, I noticed that there's a reason why it has the staged, he's giving him, cancer through radiation poisoning and all that. And of course, Kenny even says, and he actually says in commentaries and in several other interviews, that this is like the only time that he ever like made up and staged something in Kenny vs. Spenny. Like he admits that this, like, that is staged. It is completely fake. However, upon rewatching, I noticed the reason why this is. And now, unlike the genitalia episode, which is fucking awful, I hate talking about that episode. Unlike that episode where most likely something did happen during filming, which they just filmed something else instead. This one, they still kept the competition, but something obviously did happen. And I think Kenny even says this in one of the interviews and one of the commentaries as well, that that Spenny did get ill during this. He just happened to get really sick during the filming of this. And he also had obviously some sort of lump on him, which freaked him the fuck out. It wasn't even like a tumor. It was like a pimple or something. It was something really simple as that. I think he said in the end, but the whole radiation thing was just added in as a bonus almost to make the episode a bit more lively. Ultimately, this whole episode is quite a slow episode, all things considered. I think there are some highlights. Obviously they do take advantage of the real life situation of Spenny being ill, of him freaking out over this boil, which actually wasn't anything in the end. And I do like the fact they do take advantage of that side of things. And of course, you take the real life stuff and you create some fictional scenario, which is, I guess, is okay. I love the ending as well. I love the fact that Spenny, he realizes he's going to lose, so he decides to cheat. And, oh God, it's such a disgusting ending. And both Spenny and Kenny, they compare, and of course, Kenny has already cheated himself. He got the others to help him out with, because Spenny, one of the other reasons why, this episode, despite having been confirmed to have staged things in it, has real things happening, is Spenny says from the get-go that he wants to make sure that it is 100% Kenny's sperm and all that. And of course, he gets so ill that he can't bring himself to do such a thing. And so Spenny and Kenny, they compare. Spenny decides to go back. He sees Kenny freak out, and Spenny decides to actually admit, it's all fake. It's not real. I cheated. And of course, he just admits defeat, despite the fact that Kenny also cheated. The actual humiliation, oh God, humiliation. The humiliation itself, either way of putting it, it would have been horrible. If he drank it, ugh. But of course, him getting it splashed across his face. Oh, yeah, no. It's a brutal humiliation. Yeah, this is sort of a sleeper episode. It's not really anything exciting. It's pretty mundane, all things considered. And unlike the weights on genitalia episode, which is fucking garbage, this one, at least it had something going for it. At least it had the competition side of things. At least it had, both of them interacting and doing stuff. At least it, actually took a real life thing and actually came up with something that, admittedly wasn't needed, but it gave it a cheeky little, premise, I guess you could say. Who can stay in a haunted house the longest? I love the analyst video on this where the house isn't haunted. Most likely, Kenny didn't actually hear a bit loud crash. He ran out on his own accord, pretending there was, because Spenny changed himself up, and as a result, his big plan has fallen apart. And of course, Kenny has this really defeated look on his face because he realizes it. So yeah, this episode, I really like this episode. I really love the premise of this episode. I love the idea of them being in this, of course, it's not a haunted house as it turns out, nor is it the crane reel. But I love the fact that Kenny plays on that. He hires all these people to say, oh, it's a haunted house. Oh, it's got this, it's got that, it's got this. To really scare Spenny. And Spenny believes it, It's been pointed out that when Mysterion talks to Kenny, he tells him, don't actually, point out things. Let him find it out on himself. And he does just that. At one point, Kenny, he's dressed up like a pirate. He's doing all these goofy things where he's getting raped by a ghost. He's going to have an abortion. And he's going to do, and like he says about how a little girl got fucking killed and all that. And he goes over to this, like, I don't know what it is. It's like, it looks almost like an old-fashioned toilet almost. It's like a bit of floorboard that's been lifted up and there's dirt there. And he didn't, like, say anything. He lets Spenny, like, discover these pairs of, like, little girl shoes. And Spenny goes, oh, my God. And Kenny, like, freaks out at the same time. Obviously, Kenny has purposely done this. He's purposely trying to scare the shit out of Spenny, trying to get Spenny to leave. And thus, he's like, oh, my God. And then he takes the flashlight, runs off. I love the little thanks for the flashlight loser. It runs off, leaving Spenny afraid. I love that, like, all his plans are working. And, of course, the big finale was going to be this big satanic ritual thing. And, of course, it didn't go according to plan. So, obviously, the episode takes a slightly dramatic turn in the sense that Spenny decides, you know what, I'm going to win this competition. And he chains himself up, or he uses the handcuffs, and he chains himself up to a radio, making sure that he doesn't move. And, of course, it's been pointed out that from this point on, Kenny basically knew that he would not be able to win the competition, and he didn't really want it to be a draw. So he made up a way of leaving, because the big sort of crane that supposedly fell didn't actually fall. I mean, it's the type of vehicle that doesn't actually stay behind you at night, so it has to leave. And plus, when they're running, if you notice, the editing is very choppy. Like, they're running like 3 different times, and all 3 of the men, Sebi, Kenny, and forgot the other guy's name, the silver-haired guy, they're all in 3 different spots at each time. So the ending is technically a staged ending if you consider what Kenny was having to do. Like, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if Spenny didn't handcuff himself. Like, I do wonder if, like, the ending would have been completely different. There would have been this big grand finale of some scary, like, child coming out without a head, or some fucking, like, horrific gory thing, or something, like, appearing, and it scares the shit out of Spenny and causing him to run out of the house. It would have been interesting. Of course, Spenny kind of ruins it in a way by handcuffing himself, but it's also, quite a clever tactic as well on Spenny's behalf. The humiliation is pretty lame, I will say. Kenny is dressed in lingerie and he's in the store window. It's not brilliant, honestly. But as an episode, I really like this episode. It's a really funny episode. Fantastic from beginning to end. Even though, like, obviously, if you look into it, a lot of it is made up. Basically, what Kenny had done, because Spenny has no involvement in the behind the scenes, Kenny basically just found a house, claimed it was haunted, got all these so-called experts to say, oh yeah, that's definitely something haunted. And of course, even infamously, one of the so-called paranormal experts say there's a chain thing, when they should have actually said the actual whatever it was. No one would actually say that if they knew exactly what the house was and what it functioned. But obviously the plan goes horribly wrong when Spenny chains himself up, and as a result, you got that ending. But nonetheless, this is still a really good episode. Like I said, when it comes to staginess of Kenny versus Spenny episodes, it can be done well, and this is a good example where it's done well, because it's clear that Kenny knew he was going to lose, so he just made up an ending on the spot, which went against what he originally wanted to do. But still, fantastic episode. Fantastic. It's hilarious. It's great. I love the concept of it. I love the planning that Kenny went into until it went horribly wrong for him, which is a shame, but it's still a great episode. So, who can catch a bigger fish? This is one of those episodes which, again, a lot of people seem to sleep on, but I love this episode. I fucking love this episode so much. I love the whole, build-up of this episode. Like, from the get-go, we already know the results. We know that Kenny's going to win. Kenny admits he's going to cheat. Kenny films himself catching a bigger fish. He gets he gets this guy to, tell him to go to a fishing spot that has no fish. He does all this planning work, and, we see it from the get-go. Like, many episodes tend to not really show the plan until it slowly evolves and you see, like, the results. This episode from the get-go tells us everything that we need to know, which is what makes it even funnier. I love the fact that he like purposely gets himself caught. Like, he has this massive fish inside this cooler, and Spenny finds out. He's patting everyone down. He's making sure that no one is cheating. And of course, Kenny's already won. He's already got a big fish. He's already got video footage of him catching said big fish, and he's going to make it up. The only bit which I find kind of strange is how Spenny was pushed into the water and somehow survived. Not necessarily like, he pushed in, he slammed his face against a rock and a split face and all that. No, I mean, like, as in the sense that he's pushed off a boat, and the boat went quite a long distance away from him. He could have drowned. I mean, I'm assuming, that there were people nearby, and they gave him, obviously, they mentioned he had a life jacket, so he had a life jacket, but, and not only that, like, surely he could have seen from the distance, because if they could see Spenny from the distance, surely he could see them from the distance in a big boat fishing and catching fake fish. Ultimately, Kenny, another thing that I love is that he, from the get-go, he even says aloud, "I'm going to cheat in this competition." Like, he doesn't give a shit. Like, and this competition could have gone horribly wrong. It could have been quite a boring, slow episode where both of them are fishing, but no, Kenny makes it entertaining, and this is such a great episode. I love, how Spenny, like, there's this moment when he's fishing, he can't catch a fish, and of course Kenny has already supposedly caught a big fish. And so Spenny, he's thinking to himself, has he cheated? And you have all these flashbacks. And he doesn't pick up on that. Even at the end, he doesn't pick up on the fact that Kenny cheated. And the humiliation is he has his face pressed against a pig's buttocks. Not the best humiliation in the world, but I mean, it's better than nothing. I do love the introduction that Kenny gives to Hammy, the pig. It is great. But yeah, this is a good episode. I love this episode. I actually had this on my runners-up for the best episodes list, but it was in my top 20, and it still is. I really enjoy this episode a lot. I think it's fantastic. I think it's entertaining. It's a fresh episode, and this good episode streak is only going to continue because we have another one of the most best episodes ever. Who can imitate the other better? I love this episode. This is, to a lot of people, one of the best episodes for very good reason. Just like with Octopus, this is one of those episodes that has lived on and in for me. It's amazing that Series 3 has a lot of like really famous episodes, whether it's for good, like Octopus, or imitate, or for bad, like Gay Guys and Weight Lifts. But yeah, this is such a fantastic episode. The idea is both Kenny and Spenny have to imitate the other. And at first, Spenny is actually doing a quite good job as Kenny. He actually imitates Kenny quite well. And Kenny even breaks character from Spenny and says, "Well, that's actually pretty good. You're going quite well." However, we know that Kenny is very good at pushing Spenny's buttons. And we know that Spenny cannot help himself. I've said it many times already. Spenny, even when he has a golden opportunity to win, he fucks up. We see with, what is it called? The... Who does she like more? Even though Kenny cheated in that, Spenny would have fucked up anyway because he can't stop talking about Kenny and he can't stop doing cringy things. Who's the better kisser? Spenny's paranoia gets the better of him and he fucks up. Cooler. Spenny dresses up like a twat. It's like Spenny always fucks himself over. A lot of people like think that, oh wow, Kenny, cheats to win. No, Kenny does cheat a lot. Don't get me wrong, but Spenny always fucks himself over. He always screws himself up rather than Kenny actually cheating and screwing Spenny's chances up. It's usually Spenny screwing himself up, and Kenny also cheats at the same time. Kenny puts on this like over the top caricature of what he thinks Spenny is, like all the jokes that he usually makes at Spenny's expense. Like he says that Spenny is a shit-eating gay guy with a tiny dick. He has like a little like tweezers and he's jacking off to gay porn. He's eating shit out of a toilet, which is actually chocolate brownie mix. He goes into Kenny's room stressed out. He's got this gigantic nose as well and big eyebrows. I love the over-the-top characterization as well. and says, "Where's my big black dildo?" and all that. You know, he freaks out. He even like acts like Spenny on a few occasions. Like he acts violent. He, you know, acts over the top, and he's like, "I can't even look at you. You're awful. You terrible human being," etc. You know, I love that side of, you know, Kenny. I like how even though he's putting on this over the top caricature, he still goes for the whole, you know, let's just be silly sort of thing. I really just, you know, this episode just is fantastic, you know, and Spenny, for all this, he breaks character, he freaks the fuck out, he gets angry. He tries to get away from Kenny at one point because he realizes, you know, he's going to lose the competition if he keeps acting like a twat. And he goes over to Kenny's mum's house, and even then he fucks up. Like, he like, you know, she yells at him and tells him to stop being a freak, a weirdo, you're not acting like my son. And of course, you know, he then like says, "Oh, but Kenny's always like," you know, it's like Spenny like sabotages himself. And I love like listening to the commentary of this particular episode where you have Kenny and Spenny arguing throughout the whole commentary, and Spenny is so adamant that he should have won. Like, he did a better job, Kenny didn't imitate me at all, you know. And even at the end of this, like, he argues, you know, he's argumentative, you know, he thinks that he should have won. That anyone with even a single brain cell could tell that Spenny lost this, like, massively, because Spenny broke character and he doesn't seem to get that through his skull. And I love this episode. The grandpa song as well, like, and that's another like over the top joke that Spenny often makes, is like how he gets raped by his father, uncle, grandfather, and all that, and how he rapes children and all that shit, you know. And he do the same thing here, you know, the grandpa in the song. It's so great. That is one of the highlights, especially when you have Spenny like outside the door listening in, and, you know, he just snaps and he just storms through and he says, "Nope." Like, Spenny could have had a chance if he just rolled with it. If he just continued acting like the Kenny, he probably could have won, because at least he would have been somewhat in character. At least he would have like been not necessarily just in character, actually, you know, he would have been more accurate, I would argue. But because he just cannot help himself, he has to have these like autistic hissy fits, Kenny just rolls with it. He stays in character. Like, even when the guitar gets snatched off him and he's saying him, "No, stop doing that," he yells and screams and acts like Spenny. You know, he cowers and he just continues to be Spenny. Like, the only time Kenny breaks character is right at the beginning, where he says, "Well, that's actually a really good job to Spenny," you know, as Kenny. I love this episode. This is fantastic. Like, I don't remember the ordering of my best episodes list. I'm fairly sure this was in my top 5, maybe even top 3. Because I know that beer is... I know it's not top 3, because third was Who Can Sleep More. Second was beer, and number 1 was octopus. But this is one of the best episodes. Truly one of the greatest. I fucking love this episode. It's one of the most memorable episodes, and this is a definite must-see. So another episode which never made it onto my greatest episodes list, but was in the top 20, so to speak, which was and probably would have been in my top 15, is Who Can Stay the Homeless the Longest. I love this episode. I think as a concept, this works really well. Having them away from the house, like, this is sort of like a sequel to the Woods episode, where they're in the woods on their own, homeless the longest. Except whereas the Woods episode ended rather prematurely because they had a massive fist fight, and it kind of ended because they both they both got a bit too flared up, let's be perfectly honest. This one, on the other hand, I really love this episode. This episode is fantastic. I think this is a massive improvement by a long shot. You have Kenny and Spenny both both staying homeless, both doing their best to try and make sure that they motivate themselves to stay homeless. And of course it's quite hard because you're living in a cold street, you're having to find somewhere to sleep. A lot of people are rude, they just ignore you, they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to give you money. In Spenny's case, someone knocks the money out of his hand. And Kenny, on the other hand, he cheats. He just fucking cheats. Like, I will be honest. When I first watched this, I thought that Kenny would have just like swum back around to the house and just stayed there the whole time. Which would have been cheating, but it would have been funny. But yeah, like, this is just a really entertaining episode from beginning to end, because the ending where Kenny and Spenny have a little fight, and of course police officers come and arrest him, although as it turns out the police officers are actually fake police officers. It's interesting to watch, especially because there is a lot of build up to the idea of police officers getting involved. This is one of those episodes that have some sort of like foreshadowing, and I quite like that. Spenny gets arrested because he's indoors. He technically loses, and the humiliation is just a simple kick to the nuts, and it's great. I think this is a great episode. Obviously, it's not top 10 worthy, but it is great nonetheless. Alright, so the final episode is the arm wrestling competition. Another great episode which I had on my runners-up list because it's just so good. The arm wrestling competition has Kenny and Spenny. Now, Spenny immediately says, he doesn't want Kenny to cheat. So much so that he's going to be away from Kenny because he doesn't want Kenny to do anything stupid. You don't want any, like, spiking of drinks or, any cheating. And he says quite explicitly that Kenny must battle Spenny Rice. And so Kenny decided, okay, I'll go battle Spenny Rice. So he goes over to find Spencer Rice, and he finds Spencer Rice, who is a kid. And it's funny because someone actually found a recent picture of the real Spencer Rice, and actually found out that he has like a wife and kids now, which is weird to think about, considering. But then again, this is like 2004. No, 2005, 6, I don't know. Yeah, it's just weird to think about how old these things are. But I digress. Like, Kenny and Spencer, they have an arm wrestling competition. It's a big, elaborate arm wrestling competition, and he beats Spencer and he wins. Spenny, on the other hand, he's got all this security. He has all this like stuff ready and prepped, and making sure that Kenny doesn't cheat and all that. Kenny proceeds to obviously never show up. Spenny, freaks out. He's like, where the fuck is he? Where is he? Where has he gone? Why is he here? At the end, we see Kenny say, oh, well, actually, I did arm wrestle with Spencer Rice. And, of course, Spenny is like, oh, he's so angry. Like, if I changed my name to this, that, and the other, Kenny would have gone after him anyway, It's been von clear, I think is what he said in particular. Because Kenny, says, okay, well, why don't we just have an arm wrestling competition here right now? And they do. And even though, he technically already had arm wrestling competition and beat Spencer Rice, he beats Spencer Rice again. I love the fact that, like, there's all this build-up with Spenny, like, training and all this. Kenny doesn't give a shit. He goes off to find Spencer Rice, a different Spencer Rice, does this big, elaborate competition in front of all these people, beats him, and then humiliates him by, like, splatting a pie on him, throwing ice cubes down his pants and all that. Spenny, on the other hand, he has to fucking go over and fucking, train, and like he's waiting for this big event and it doesn't happen. Like, it's the comparison between the two. Like, Kenny is this really popular and having all this fun. Spenny is just having the worst time of his life. Like, he wanted this big competition and instead he got nothing. So yeah, Kenny wins. Spenny, loses twice, in fact. I guess you could say double humiliation almost. And he has one of the most disgusting humiliations ever. He has to stick his hand in this, like, awful toilet. Like, it's the worst looking toilet ever. Even just thinking about it almost makes me sick. Yeah, like, this toilet is disgusting. Spenny sticks his hand in it, and it's like even drips off his finger. It's disgusting. Like, I just cut off my own hand if that ever happened to me. I would never do that. But he unplugs the toilet, which is good, I guess. But yeah, Spenny gets humiliated twice in this, technically speaking. But yeah, Kenny, he wins twice. It's a great episode, great way to end the series. And honestly, let's talk about Series 3 now. Let's see if it was better than Series 2. Overall, Series 3 is a massive step up from Series 2. Series 2 had a lot of bad episodes, a lot of weaker episodes. Had very good episodes like at the beginning, but didn't do so here. It's almost the opposite case with Series 3. Like, the first half of Series 3 is very weak. You have gay guys, you have the weight on genitalia, you have what is the other ones that really sucked? Porno. Yeah, you had that. You had, weaker ones like Seaman as well. It's like series 3 really starts off very weak, but it gets better, and that's the thing, it gets better. And unlike series 2 where it just got worse and just progressively just felt more and more boring and lifeless, series 3 got really good. And honestly, I think that says a lot about how good series 3 is as a series and how much of a step up it was. Like, one of the things that I do like is that, unlike series 2 where it felt a lot more staged and had a lot more, like, dare I say, storytelling in the episodes, series 3 does have that, but only in the first half. And after that, it's gone. It manages to have entertaining episode after entertaining episode. There are bad episodes, like I said. Gay Guys and Wait on Gente are two of the single worst episodes of the entire show. Porno is another really bad episode. And, those episodes are so fucking bad that it probably brings down series 3 a lot. But you then, counteract that with First One to Laugh, Octopus, and even Fishing, hell. But Imitate in particular, like, those ones are really, really fucking good episodes. Really fantastic episodes. So, yeah, series 3 is sort of like a mixed bag in that sense. But I think the good outweighs the bad. Whilst there is a lot of bad, and trust me, as the worst episode of the whole show, as well as the best episode of the whole show, it does also, it has a lot more good in it. It's a massive step up from series 2. I felt like a lot of the problems that series 2 had is more or less gone, not completely gone, but somewhat, fixed. Whereas series, 2, I just felt like there was so many bad episodes, so many bad moments that I just could not bring myself to enjoy it. Overall, series 3, fantastic series. I think it's great. Series, better than series 2 by a long shot. Better than series 1. Truly the best series so far that we've reviewed. However, it does have some of the worst episodes as well. Like, it is amazing. It's just amazing how dramatic it goes from, like, the best to like the worst. But there is very few bad episodes. There's mostly good episodes, so don't worry about that. So yeah, overall, Kenny vs. Spenny series 3, I think, is a massive step up. Very much better. And I'll see you next time for series 4, which, by the way, is one of the best seasons.